Sometimes in order to go forward in an investigation, you have to go back to the beginning. And once I did, I realized we have missed something huge, y'all. Crocs on the ground, and you're never gonna believe what I just found.
Something new has surfaced in the Nolan Wells investigation, but before we decide what it means, we need to go backward. Back to July 5th, back to the first search, and back to an original MDMR record that raises a question that may be more important than some of the theories now circulating online. How did investigators begin identifying the people they wanted to talk to? Because the material we're examining today brings together three separate pieces of information. First, there are claims about a Triton boat photographed behind a security fence. Second, there is the July 5th search timeline, including the failed drone launches and the people who were reportedly on or around Horn Island that morning. And third, there is an MDMR report containing language about investigators trying to locate and interview a female subject who was described as potentially connected to Nolan's disappearance. Those three things are now being discussed as though they form one larger picture. But do they? That's what we need to determine. And I want to establish something before we go any further. A theory can be interesting without being true. A coincidence can be worth investigating without being evidence of a crime. And a person's name appearing in an investigative document does not automatically make that person a suspect. So we're going to separate this into three categories. What the records actually establish, what witnesses or online sources claim, and what remains unknown. Publicly available reporting confirms that MDMR conducted an extensive search for Nolan on July 5th, including patrol vessel operations and drone searches. Records place the first successful drone flight at approximately 12:40 p.m. after earlier launch attempts reportedly failed because of software problems. Those are the kinds of details we can anchor to. The more complicated questions begin when we try to determine who supplied particular information to investigators, why certain people were considered relevant, and whether the people appearing in online theories can actually be placed where those theories say they were. And that's where this story gets interesting. Because sometimes the newest development isn't actually the most important one. Sometimes the important piece is buried in the first report. So we're going back there. Not to decide who is guilty. Not to name a villain, but to ask a much narrower question. What did investigators know? When did they know it? And where did that information come from? And before we get into the analysis, if you've been following Nolan's case, keep his family in your prayers. If you believe this case deserves continued attention, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video. We're not here to convict anybody through YouTube. We're here to examine the record, identify the unanswered questions, and follow the evidence wherever it leads.
And yes, I have already tried making a video about this, so let's try it again. All right, so according to one of the original MDMR reports, Captain William Freeman called the Master Sergeant and told them to locate and interview a female subject. And that's how we get to this girl, Lainey. Now, this has always bothered me because I'm like, why is Lainey's name in this report? Why was she brought up at all? Especially since, according to Lainey, she hadn't seen Nolan in over a year and was on a completely different island. So it never made sense to me. And then it effing hit me. So according to this report, on July 5th at 9 a.m., assistance was requested from Captain Freeman as part of the drone search. Freeman was transported to Horn Island, and at approximately 10 a.m. he tried 3 failed launches. It ended up being a software error, and he was unable to fix it in the field. So then at 10:30, Freeman requests that Smith come out and assist with drone duty. Freeman and another officer went and picked up Smith and transported him to Horn Island. But by 12:40, the first drone finally takes flight. Now, wait a minute. If Freeman was out on Horn Island trying to do this drone launch, had to call in assistance, go and get that person, bring them back to Horn Island, then when the F did he get this information about Lainey? Oh, wait, I have an idea.
Was looking for Nola, who was on the boat. Was it multiple boats? Multiple boats. Okay, explain that. Who was out of this group? Who was on what boat? Or who was on a boat or not going out looking for Nola?
So, me, Wyatt, and Trayson got in the boat. We got in the Palm Beach that morning, the morning after, and to the islands, and we were met by a DMR. There was 7 DMR boats already out there, DMR and park rangers. We talked to them, we gave them all of our information. They personally asked if any of us were on the boat with him that day. We told them yes. They just said, all right, well, I mean, we got the area scoped out. I mean, and then after that, we just went up to the beach. I think we met up with y'all in the water.
Okay, so by Morgan's own words, he, Trayston, and Wyatt were on the Palm Beach out at Horn Island talking to MDMR. Oh, and when was that? When did they do that?
From 9:45 to 11:50, 12 o'clock era, about lunchtime. While we were on the water, we talked to a rescue guy.
Oh, you were out there until 11:50, you say? You mean 5 minutes before this phone call happened? Does that sound like a coincidence to you? Now, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to conclude that they were the ones who gave this information to Captain Bill Freeman. Again, why would they give Lainey's name if she wasn't there in that group that day? Especially when he was supposedly last seen with Katie, whose name again is conveniently absent from any report that we've seen. Now, this is about to get deep, y'all, because I reread the line again, now knowing that the boys were the ones who probably gave this information and not just some random good citizen. Specific wording says, Captain Freeman said to locate and interview a female subject that was possibly involved with the missing person on Horn Island. Possibly involved? How did I miss that? How did we all miss that? Because there's two other boys mentioned in this that they don't make contact with, and it just says possible names associated with Wells. That is very different and intentional language. Now, as I've told y'all, I've spent weeks learning the dynamics of all these different friend groups and who they're friends with online, etc. Now, this is Lainey. Now, most people have clocked this picture where Lainey is with a girl who is wearing the same swimsuit last 4th of July as the one that is on the boat with Katie. I'm going to try and do this in the easiest way possible. I have narrowed down the BFF group with Lainey and these girls. All of these girls have called each other their best friends and taken pictures with each other at some point or another. Now, none of these girls are friends with any of the Wyatt Warren friend group. All of them are friends with Trayston and Trayston's sister. Trayston's sister has best friend picture relationships with all of these girls. It's very clear that this is a core group of friends. There's group pictures with them, they've lived together, etc. Now, Kendall is the one in the blue and red bikini in this picture. But I found another picture of Bailey and Maggie here from last 4th of July wearing the exact same red and blue swimsuit that Kendall was wearing. So it's pretty safe to say that these girls coordinated all wearing the same bathing suit. Also found this picture of Lainey from 2 4th of Julys ago wearing this bathing suit. Does it look familiar to anybody? That's right, that is clearly the same bathing suit from the boat with Katie, with a face that's conveniently been blurred. Now, do we think it's a coincidence that 2 swimsuits associated with this friend group all ended up on the same boat as Katie? I'm gonna say the chances are slim. Now, Kendall seems to have a longtime boyfriend, and guess what his name is? Jacob Brooks, which is the second name that comes up on this report. And guess who seems to be Lainey's longtime boyfriend? Drew Johnson, the other name on this report. Now, Drew, unlike all of these people over here, Drew is friends with the Warren Wyatt friend group. Also the only one out of this entire group that is Facebook friends with Nolan. If this was the boys telling this information to the captain, why were they saying that their buddy's girlfriend was possibly involved with Nolan? And why would Trayston be snitching on his sister's friends like this? Now wait, one of Katie's BFFs, Nevaeh, is friends with a Caden McGrath. Caden is friends with 0 people from either group except for Nevaeh, as far as I can tell. Caden is somehow related to a Joe, who is frequently advertising on his page for the Biloxi Bay RV Resort. The one that I was saying that according to the GPS coordinates looks like they may have dropped somebody off at. So in my opinion, Joe is clearly somehow related to the Marty McGrath, who was the one who apparently took all these people on this boat, including Katie, when this friend group was supposedly left on this island. And I feel like that language is really important and overlooked because left makes it sound like your ride left without you. Now, according to Joe's LinkedIn, he is IT for the Ocean Marine Group, which is owned by Jerry Adkerson. Aiden is also the only person I can find who is friends with Captain Chris Seth Ward, the son of Chris Ward, who was called by Jerry to cancel the sea tow allegedly on his private line before the sea tow call was even finished. I also found a very weak connection through social media between Lainey and a girl who is in the same sorority as the girl who threw the party, Ava, allegedly threw the party. So what if Trayston's slick comment wasn't about Katie at all? Because I don't know about you guys, but we have seen absolutely zero proof that Katie was actually out there with them. They have kept the story hyper-focused on Katie, and no other girls' names have really gotten out. But if Katie has been the red herring this whole time? I don't know. I'm still trying to piece through. I'm still trying to figure it out because there's clearly a chunk that is missing out of this story. Like, I think Lainey is a red herring too, don't get me wrong, because I don't see these boys like freely offering up their motive or anything. But it sounds like maybe this Lainey girl was involved with Nolan behind her boyfriend's back at some point, and they tried.
Now let's slow this down, because several different claims are being layered together here. The first concerns the boat. A video circulating online shows a Triton-style vessel behind what appears to be a security barrier. The people filming it noticed features they believed resembled the boat associated with Nolan's July 4th trip. That is worth noting, but it is not an identification. A Triton is a manufacturer. Multiple boats can share the same manufacturer, similar hull designs, similar engines, and similar equipment. So simply finding a Triton does not establish that you found the vessel connected to Nolan. And the fact that a boat is sitting behind a fence does not establish that law enforcement seized it. It doesn't establish that the boat was searched. It doesn't establish that the boat was evidence. And it doesn't establish that the boat played any role in Nolan's disappearance. There is, however, a much stronger way to approach that question. Identify the vessel, get the registration, get the hull identification number, establish the owner, establish the make and model, establish where the vessel was physically located, and then compare that information with the documented timeline. That distinction is especially important because there is already publicly reported GPS information concerning the Triton that carried Nolan to Horn Island. CBS reported that GPS data obtained from MDMR tracked that vessel leaving the mainland at approximately 9:56 a.m. on July 4th, reaching Horn Island around 11:14 a.m. and departing the island around 4:31 p.m. So we don't need to guess about whether the case involves a Triton. The public record already establishes that a Triton was part of the July 4th timeline. The question is whether the boat seen in the later video is that particular vessel. Until the vessel is positively identified, that remains an open question. Now we get to the MDMR material. According to the source we're analyzing, an original report contains language directing Captain William Freeman to locate and interview a female subject who was considered potentially connected to the missing person on Horn Island. That wording deserves attention, but it also needs to be interpreted carefully. Possibly involved is not the same thing as suspect. It is not the same thing as person of interest. And it is certainly not the same thing as an accusation of criminal conduct. A person can be relevant to an investigation simply because investigators believe that person may have information. That is why I think the better question is not, what did this woman do? The better question is, why did investigators want to speak with her? And then, who gave investigators her name? That second question could potentially explain how the investigative trail developed. And this is where the July 5th timeline becomes important. The records show that MDMR's search effort was already underway that morning. Around 9 a.m., drone assistance was requested. Around 10 a.m., 3 launch attempts reportedly failed because of a software problem. Around 10:30, additional assistance was requested. The first successful drone flight eventually launched at approximately 12:40 p.m. None of those events, standing alone, indicates wrongdoing. They're simply pieces of the search chronology. But the source material introduces another account involving people who were reportedly on a boat traveling toward Horn Island during that same general period. If that account is accurate, and if the people involved actually interacted with MDMR personnel, then there was an opportunity for investigators to receive information directly from people who had been connected to the July 4th gathering. That's an opportunity. It is not proof of what information was exchanged, and it certainly doesn't prove that those people supplied the female subject's name. That is an inference. And this is exactly where responsible analysis requires us to stop and draw a line. We can say the timelines may overlap. We cannot say the overlap proves the source of the information. To establish that, investigators would need the underlying records. Interview notes, officer reports, dispatch audio, call records, statements from the people involved, and, ideally, a clear chain showing who first identified the person investigators were trying to locate. That would answer a question that social media cannot. Now there is another issue here that deserves attention. The source attempts to reconstruct the social network surrounding Nolan and the people who may have been connected to the July 4th gathering. Names are compared. Friendships are mapped. Boyfriends and girlfriends are connected. Facebook relationships are examined. Photographs are compared. And at one point, similar swimsuits are used as a possible way to identify people appearing in different photographs. This can be useful investigative work in the right context, but it has a very low evidentiary ceiling by itself. A Facebook friendship doesn't establish criminal involvement. Dating somebody doesn't establish criminal involvement. Being part of the same friend group doesn't establish criminal involvement. And knowing somebody who knows somebody connected to a boat doesn't establish criminal involvement. Social networks can help investigators identify potential witnesses. They can help establish relationships. They can help explain who may have known whom, but they cannot by themselves prove what happened on Horn Island. The swimsuit issue has the same limitation. Two people can own the same swimsuit. People can borrow clothing. The same manufacturer can produce similar designs. Lighting can alter colors. And photographs can make patterns look different from one image to another. If investigators needed to establish who was physically present on a particular boat, they would need stronger evidence. Original photographs, original video, metadata, witness identification, location data, boat records, messages, or some other independent evidence placing that person there. And that brings us back to the names: Lainey, Katie, Drew, Jacob, and the other people being discussed online. The important question isn't simply which person is connected to which group. The important question is, who was actually there? Because presence is something that can potentially be reconstructed. If a large group attended the July 4th gathering, investigators should theoretically be able to build a timeline showing who arrived, which boats they arrived on, who remained on the island, who left, who returned, and who was interviewed afterward. That is far more meaningful than an Instagram connection. And there's another reason this matters. The public record already contains a documented investigative theory from the early hours of July 5th. Fox 8 reported that MDMR records say a JSO lieutenant told MDMR that deputies had spoken with several friends who traveled to the island with Nolan, and that those friends said Nolan remained on the island in the company of an unknown female. The same record reflects the working belief at that time that Nolan may have returned on another vessel without his phone. Notice the language. The record documents that this was the information investigators had at the time. It does not independently establish that Nolan actually left on another vessel. And it doesn't tell us, from that excerpt alone, exactly which friends supplied which piece of information. That distinction is crucial. A report can establish what investigators were told. It does not automatically establish that everything they were told was true. And this is where the question surrounding the female subject becomes more interesting. If investigators were working from information supplied by witnesses, we should want to know who supplied it. If the information came from another source, we should want to know that. And if investigators independently identified the person, that should also be documented. The chain matters. Now let's address the theory that Katie may have been a red herring. Could that be possible? Yes. Could Lainey's appearance in an early report have another explanation? Absolutely. Could the public have focused heavily on one person while other relevant witnesses received little attention? That's possible too. But none of those possibilities tells us what actually happened. A theory becomes useful when it generates something that can be tested. So instead of asking, "Do you think Katie was the red herring?" ask, "What record would prove that?" Instead of asking, "Do you think Lainey was connected to Nolan?" Ask, why did investigators seek her out? Was she interviewed? What did she tell them? And did investigators independently verify what she said? That's the standard. Then there's the suggestion that federal investigators may be involved. That would obviously matter if officially confirmed, but nothing we've discussed here establishes that. A boat behind a fence doesn't establish federal involvement. A social media account disappearing doesn't establish evidence suppression. And an unusual development in a case doesn't automatically mean the FBI has entered it. Those are possibilities being discussed online. Until an official source confirms them, they remain possibilities. And this is why going back to the beginning matters. The newer theories are loud. The original records are quieter. But the original records tell us what investigators were actually documenting at the time. And that's where we can begin testing the theories. The July 5th search wasn't hypothetical. It happened. MDMR documented patrol vessel operations, drone assistance, and later search activity. The first successful drone flight occurred at approximately 12:40 p.m., followed by another flight that was later aborted after a battery problem. Those timestamps give us something concrete. The next step is determining what else was happening around those timestamps. Who was there? Which vessels were present? Who spoke with investigators? What information was exchanged? And what records exist to corroborate those accounts? That's where this story needs to go next.
Watch. All right, so I'm here with Biloxi Cooking and Fishing.
What's going on, yo?
And we are boat hunting today. We are out here looking at, no, it does say security. Let me show y'all what's right next to the fucking wildcat we just found. Look at there. What? What? What's interesting?
The trim's not hooked up on.
What do you mean? What does that mean?
See those two rods coming out of the...
Yeah, but I don't know what that means.
That's the trim. What
Okay.
that does is that makes that motor do that.
Okay.
Okay? So if the trim is not hooked up, and they were saying that they had issues with the trim, assuming this is the boat. And I'm not sure because I don't see a name on it.
Hold on. There's a key still in it too. Let's get nice and in
By the way, people, just to let y'all know, if somebody says we're trespassing, we are on city easement, so kiss our ass.
out the gate.
We are on city easement.
And after hearing all of that, I think we need to separate the genuinely important questions from the theories that are getting ahead of the evidence. Start with the MDMR report. If the wording presented in the source accurately reflects the original document, then the reference to a female subject considered potentially connected to Nolan is something worth understanding. Not because it proves that person did anything wrong. It doesn't. What it establishes at most is that investigators were seeking information from someone they considered relevant enough to locate and interview. So the next question is, what happened after that instruction? Was the woman located? Was she interviewed? What did she tell investigators? Who initially identified her? And did anything from that interview affect the investigation? Those are answerable questions. They are questions that should be addressed through records rather than speculation. Then look at the July 5th timeline. We have documented search activity. We have the drone sequence. We have the approximate times. And we have accounts from people who say they were also in the area. The value of those accounts depends on whether they can be independently corroborated. If someone says they were on a particular boat at a particular time, there may be a phone location record. There may be GPS data. There may be photographs. There may be video. There may be marine radio traffic. There may be witnesses. There may be timestamps and messages. That's how an investigation moves forward. Not by asking which version sounds more convincing, by asking which version survives independent verification. The same principle applies to the boat. If the vessel in the boat hunting video is supposed to be the same Triton connected to Nolan's July 4th trip, identify it. Match the registration. match the hull identification number, match the physical characteristics, establish ownership, establish its location, then compare that information against the known timeline. The public record already gives us GPS information for the Triton involved in the July 4th trip. CBS reported that the vessel reached Horn Island around 11:14 a.m. and later departed around 4:31 p.m. before returning to the mainland. That means the investigation doesn't need a visual resemblance to establish that a particular Triton was involved. The question is whether the newly filmed boat is that same vessel. That's a much narrower question. And narrow questions are good, because narrow questions can be answered. Now consider the social media research. It may help map relationships. It may help identify potential witnesses. It may help explain how different groups were connected, but it should never be used as a substitute for evidence. Someone's online friendship does not establish what happened on July 4th. A relationship does not establish participation in a crime. A swimsuit does not establish identity. And a chain of acquaintances does not establish a conspiracy. The more complicated the social network becomes, the more important that distinction becomes. Otherwise, every connection starts looking suspicious simply because it connects to another connection. That's not investigation. That's pattern recognition without a control. And pattern recognition can be wrong. The same caution applies to the theories surrounding Katie and Laney. Maybe one of them received more attention than the evidence justified. Maybe investigators were working from incomplete information. Maybe there were additional people whose names never became prominent publicly. Or maybe the explanations already circulating have perfectly ordinary explanations that haven't been fully documented yet. At this point, we don't know. And saying we don't know isn't weakness. It's accuracy. So what would actually move this investigation forward? First, the complete original MDMR material. Not a cropped screenshot. Not a social media recreation. The complete document, including the surrounding entries, dates, times, authorship, and the information underlying the decision to locate the female subject. Second, the interview trail. Who was interviewed? When? By whom? What information did each person provide? And can the source of the information about Nolan's whereabouts be established? Third, the vessel timeline. Which boats were where? Who was aboard? What do the GPS records show? And can those records be reconciled with the statements given to investigators? Fourth, the digital evidence. Phone location data, messages, metadata, photographs, video timestamps, anything capable of independently placing a person or device somewhere. Because digital records have an advantage over online theories, they don't care which theory you prefer. A location either matches or it doesn't. A timestamp either lines up or it doesn't. A file either existed at a particular time or it didn't. And that kind of evidence can dramatically narrow the possibilities. Finally, we need the complete human timeline, not just the most familiar names. Everyone who was there, everyone who arrived, everyone who left, everyone who remained, everyone who spoke with investigators, and everyone whose account can be independently checked. Because the biggest unanswered question may not be, who looks suspicious? It may simply be, do we have the complete picture of who was actually there? And that is where I think this latest development leaves us. We have an interesting boat claim. We have a documented search timeline. We have an investigative report containing language that deserves clarification. We have witness accounts. We have social media research. And we have theories attempting to connect all of those things. But we do not yet have enough publicly established evidence to turn those connections into a conclusion about who caused Nolan's death or what happened to him. That line matters, because Nolan's family deserves answers that are stronger than an internet theory. They deserve answers that can withstand scrutiny, answers that can be independently verified. And if this case ultimately reaches a courtroom, answers that can withstand the questions asked there. So as more information comes out, the standard should remain the same. Show the source. Identify what it actually says. Separate that from what somebody thinks it means. Then ask what evidence could confirm or disprove the interpretation. If something is confirmed, report it. If something is disproven, report that too. And if something remains unresolved, say that. Because the goal isn't to win a theory. The goal is to find out what happened to Nolan Wells. And the closer we stay to the evidence, the better chance we have of getting there. That's where this investigation stands right now. Not solved, not explained, but still capable of being tested, piece by piece, record by record, timestamp by timestamp. And that's exactly how we should follow it.